Vanquish evil far and wide. Unrelenting Thundertide.
Greetings fellow Exile, and welcome to this video showcasing my Vivid Stampede Huntress Spirit Walker Lightning Arrow build guide. This build is a 2-button, lazy, league starter compatible and able to clear most of the endgame. When I first saw the Spirit Walker Ascendancy, I immediately just wanted to try out this summoning of all of these stags, and while the build is not able to completely circulate around it, it's still a lot of fun just plowing through maps, stomping on your enemies. Okay, so let's start look at some pros and cons of this build. The execution for this build is very simple. We basically use Lightning Arrow 90% of the time, and if we happen to stumble upon some tougher enemies, we also use Lightning Rod in order to deal some extra damage. This build is fully league start compatible. I league started this build this league without knowing what I was heading into, without a guide or anything. I think it will be much easier now that it's refined to find out how to do this more effectively, or you can just follow some more established build like Fabgun's Lightning Arrow build or similar for the leveling process, and then switch over to my build guide when you reach the endgame. The gear progression of this build is fairly linear. We just have target stats that we want to get. We want some evasion rating, we want some specific damage types added to our gear, we want gem levels, etc. And then there are some quirks with the mana sustain, but that is solved, and there are 2 different approaches which will be covered later in this guide. This build is also fairly durable. All the footage of this video is 100% fully 6 modded tier 15 corrupted waystone maps, and there is very little to worry about. I mean, it's not a phase tank build, it's still an evasion rated build, so you still have to move a lot and you have to make sure you don't stand in stuff. It's susceptible to damage over time effects, so ignited ground, ignite, some boss effects like when they do these kinds of beams and stuff that you can't evade that do damage over time are pretty nasty. But in general, this build is very tanky, and you will not die if you know what you're doing. And then finally, the wave clear of this build is amazing. We press one button and we will create a lot of effects from that. We will summon the stags, it does a lot of AoE damage. We have Herald of Thunder, which just blasts all the enemies around us with lightning from the sky. The stags will pull enemies together into groups so that they are easier to AoE further. There's just a lot of stuff going on with just one button, and everything around us just dies pretty much. And then if we look at the cons of this build has a little lower single target DPS, so the bosses takes a while to kill, especially the pinnacle bosses. Highly mobile monsters can be a bit annoying. I mean, the stags, if you only use the stags, it's not a problem. The stags are like homing missiles, they will just follow the bosses around and they will hit them. But you also, if you want to do max damage, of course, needs to also hit your lightning arrows, and you can't really use lightning rods. For example, fighting the Arbiter of Divinity, it's really hard to hit him with the lightning rods, so you will have to do with the stags and the lightning arrows, pretty much. The mana sustain quirks I already mentioned with the 2 approaches that we can take to solve that. We also have a low health, as I mentioned earlier. The health pool is low, so dots are quite nasty. And I would say the biggest downside with this build from a progression perspective is the mid-late game dip. So basically, when we come to the end game and we start traversing the maps and we perhaps want to go fast to like tier 14, tier 15 maps, that's when this build is at its weakest, before we get a really good bow, before we get the stuff that we need basically. And then if you look more into specifics regarding offense and defense, as mentioned earlier, we fire Lightning Arrow. We make sure that we are in a constant movement in order to generate stags. We summon the stags. These stags will clump enemies together. They will apply shock. They will create these kinds of pulsing static shock AoE effects on the ground and do tons of damage to a lot of enemies that are even out of the screen basically. Also, Herald of Thunder will create lightning storms that will just blast enemies with lightning from the sky all the time. Pretty much everything around us will just be blasted apart. start. We dodge roll and we get owl feathers, which is not a big deal, but we still fire additional lightning arrows whenever we dodge roll, and we get some extra evasion rating. We have our bear companion. He doesn't do much damage, but he applies exposure to bosses and tougher enemies if we get to pound on them for a while. And then finally we have lightning rod as our second ability for bosses, which increases our damage by a lot. We basically fire like 3 or 4 lightning arrows beneath them and then shoot them with lightning arrow again. They will take a lot more damage. And then for defense, of course we want to be resistance capped. We then just want as much evasion rating as possible, because that also means we get a lot of deflection rating. We have also increased damage mitigation from deflection from the passive tree. The bear will distract enemies and tank damage for us, and also some of the damage that we take will be absorbed by the bear. So there's a lot of layers to the defenses here. I use Runic Ward on my body armor. I really like Runic Ward because it's easier to regain health while Runic Ward is recharging. But if you prefer Energy Shield, I guess you could just modify, like have a helmet with Energy Shield instead, or have a body armor with hybrid Energy Shield, evasion rating, something like that. But you basically need either Energy Shield or Runic Ward to get more health, because the base health will not be enough. And then we use Wind Dancer as our defensive spirit game option, which will give us extra evasion rating basically, and defense. Now let's also go over the Ascendancy quickly. The Spirit Walker, we basically put all our points into the different spirit animal passive points. We start with Vivid Stampede. Then you can take 2 approaches. Either you can go for the 4 points direct into Vivid Stampede and get those more high damage stags, but I think I prefer to go for all of the 3 different spirit animals directly, so that we can get Sacred Unity, which is basically a bunch of extra bonuses for all our animal companions. This is what gives our bear the ability to absorb some of our damage. It will make the stags homing, so they will, instead of just running straight forward and right into a wall or something, they will actually seek out enemies and chase them. And for the owl feathers we also get some extra evasion rating, and there's just a lot of bonuses. There's life regeneration from the bear as well. So I prefer to go Vivid Stampede first, then go for the Protector, then go for owl feathers, take Sacred Unity, and then when you do your final Ascendancy you get the Morrigan's Guidance, which gives an extreme damage boost for the stags. But basically the stags are not that useful when they just leap straight forward anyway. So on the other hand, you also get a lot more stags if you have the Morrigan's Guidance. But yeah, it's up to you basically. Experiment and do what you think is best. And then we have a quick gear overview. For our bow and quiver, we basically want to maximize our DPS. We want physical damage and we want lightning damage preferably. And then we want to have skill gem levels on our quiver, preferably be on our bow as well if we can get that. We want added physical and lightning damage. Rings will be covered in the next section, but this is basically how we manage our mana sustain. For armor, basically like helmet, gloves, belt, the rest of the slots, shoes. We want resistance cap, we want maximum evasion rating, we want some health, and then as mentioned earlier, we want some Runic Ward on body armor or some source of Energy Shield. I have like 650 or 700 Runic Ward right now, so we want like a total health pool of at least 2,500, I would say. And then we want, if we can get it, it's nice to also get some extra percent deflection from evasion rating as well. Then for charms, I would recommend going Poison, Bleeding and Ignite, basically just negating all of the dots that can affect us. I like to also have the extra modifiers, reduced usages, and then also that we get some guard whenever they trigger. For health flask, just get one with a maximum recovery, as much health recovery as possible basically. Mana flask is also covered in the next section. And finally the amulet we want, of course, skill gem levels, increased evasion rating percent is nice, some health, resistances, etc. And then we have rings and mana sustain. And of course, mana sustain is extremely important. No one wants to play a build where you have to constantly worry about running out of mana. And also especially for a build like this, which is already very lazy and intended to not require a lot of effort, this is really important. So basically what I did when I reached maps, and basically until I was like level 93, 94, something like that, I was well into doing tier 15 maps at that point, was to have a Thief's Torment Ring. Of course this applies some pressure on your other armor that you need to get resistance cap and stuff, and it also limits the amount of damage we can do, but it's also a very lazy way to just have infinite mana. And then I also had a regular mana flask along with that, with just a high recovery. Now when you can afford to buy some decent rings and you have grinded some, and then it's a very good idea to transition away from this and instead get a Lavianga's Spirit Mana Flask. And this is basically a unique mana flask that constantly revives mana for us, but at a low rate. So I would say it's not worth getting this if you can't get a hold of some that costs that has at least a 55 plus mana regained. And I got mine for like 15 exalt, so they are not expensive. And then instead of the Thief's Torment ring, we have 2 rare rings. And both those rings, I would recommend having at least 60% mana regeneration rate and mana leech on physical damage. And this is nice because lightning arrow doesn't convert all damage to lightning, so we still get some physical damage leech when we use lightning arrow, which synergizes very well there. And basically if you have those 2 rings, you have this Lavianga spirits, then you should not have mana problems. And if you still have mana problems, for example in very long boss fights, I actually use a bow shot, like the basic bow firing ability, on my right click, and I use that as a mana potion basically, because that leeches a lot of mana using this mana leech mechanic. Then of course you can do whatever you want with the rest of the stats of the rings. 4 modifiers per ring. I have increased lightning damage and added physical lightning damage and attacks, and perhaps some resistances as well. So this is a more flexible dynamic and has a higher potential overall. Approach number 2. So let's have a look at the passive tree just briefly here. So I prefer pathing down through the evasion rating nodes and the defensive nodes here. I think they are just stronger in general for this build because there's a lot of melee damage hybrid stuff going on here, basically. And we have some chance to shock. We have some lightning penetration over here, some extra lightning damage here, but there's really not that much in this passive tree that are like really mandatory. It's like later in the late game when you start to reach like level 85, maybe somewhere between level 85 level 90. That's at least when you want to go for these nodes that give us a chance for our hits to be lucky. This one here and this one over here. And lucky hits is very strong with lightning, since lightning has a very broad damage span. You can do very little damage or you can do very much damage. Then the luck basically affects us more than it would with like a fire build or something similar. As I mentioned earlier, here we have this deflection, extra deflection damage mitigation. We have even more deflection rating. There's a lot of evasion and deflection in this build. We have like a situational evasion rating, like here when we hit enemies we get evasion rating when we are on full life, and stuff like that. Oh, and also for the anoint I have chosen to go for pure power, 10% more maximum lightning damage. This is awesome. This does not only affect our lightning arrow, it affects our vivid stampede, it affects Herald of Thunder, basically everything that we do scales very well with that node. So yeah, that's just a brief overview of the passive tree. Of course this will also be featured in the Path of Building guide. This is also where Humming Calamity is a must-have when you do this lightning damage with Herald of Thunder. It's just a huge damage boost basically. So yeah, that's it. And that's it for this time. Thank you so much for watching this video. Leave me a like and please subscribe if you feel like this is content you want to consume more in the future. And yeah, hope you enjoy this unrelenting Thundertide of a build, and hope to see you next time. Bye.